It's time for the real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? It's the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Twitter, maybe you're listening via that Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you get your apps. YouTube, though, best place to watch. Questions already being fired off. OC asking a great question. Do the Purdue struggles make it more or less likely for IU to pull off the victory? I'm actually talking about that a little later on today. So, yeah, got a great show lined up. Got a new guest making his first appearance. Tyler Warren is all the rage here in the city of Indianapolis. That is the guy that Colts fans seem to want for the Colts to draft the most. Max Toscano is all about tight ends. He joins the show at 11 o'clock. Should be fantastic. But I want to start with basketball because, as Otter Creek mentioned in the YouTube chat, Indy Sports Ticket, if you want to head over there and subscribe, Purdue's struggling right now. They are. It is just a brutal stretch for them. They've lost 3 in a row. Meanwhile, IU fans are like, is it really that bad? Like, we do that every single year. And so I was thinking about Purdue going into that game last night and really just college basketball as a whole, right? As we become closer and closer to conference tournaments and all those different types of things. And I just, when I sat down last night to kind of look into just the world of college basketball, I asked a pretty simple question of myself. Where's the gap in college basketball? Like, where is the separation from teams that I know can win a national championship, teams that I think can win a national championship, and then everybody else? And when it comes to teams that I think can most definitely win a national title, and I promise we will get to Purdue here, there's 5 teams that come to mind. Auburn, obviously. Alabama, Florida, Duke, and St. John's. You know, Auburn has done nothing but beat good teams all year. Okay, they've beaten 4th-ranked Houston, 5th-ranked Iowa State, 13th-ranked Purdue, 21st-ranked Mississippi State, 6th-ranked Tennessee, and 4th-ranked Alabama. Okay, like they've beaten like every good team in the country this year. That's what it feels like. They have an incredible amount of quad 1 wins. Like, they just seem to beat every single good team that they play, with the exception of Duke, who beat them earlier in the season. Auburn is just a juggernaut. That's what they feel like. And then you have Alabama, who offensively is really good, just like they were last year. Right? And it feels different with Alabama this year. Right? Like they don't feel as dependent on the 3-point shot this year as they have in years past. The numbers don't support that. This year, in the last 2 years, they're averaging around 29.5 threes attempted per game. Right, and that's where, it's been at the last 3 years. The difference, though, is when they need a bucket now, they don't seem to chuck threes like they used to in the past. They kind of look to get to the rim when they really need a bucket. I like that a little bit more about them this year as opposed to years past. Florida, big and athletic. They laid an egg against Tennessee. They only scored 44 points. Outside of that game, though, they've been nothing short of great. They beat Auburn on the road. That's the best win in all of college basketball. Right? They score it. They're averaging 84 points a game. They're only giving up 67 points a game. Todd Golden is not leaving Gainesville. Sorry, IU fans. Right? And that's, they're putting up those numbers in a tough SEC conference. They can shoot it. They're shooting 35% from 3 on the season. Like, Florida is very complete. Okay, and then you have Duke, who's just littered with NBA talent. Now, they're in a bad conference, and when you have a lot of NBA talent in a bad conference, you're going to win a lot of games. But the thing that I like about them most is John Shire's best player, Cooper Flagg, a guy who's going to be the number 1 overall pick. Doesn't care about stats. He doesn't. He just wants to win. And that's the most important thing to have for any team. Your best player has to be about the team, and they have to be about winning. And Cooper Flagg is that. And they're just running through this awful ACC conference. Okay, they lead the ACC in points allowed, and they're second in points scored behind SMU. Okay, they're shooting 38% from 3 on the season. That's 25th in the country. They can score. they can defend, and their best player sets a tone that we are about winning and that we have to play defense because Cooper Flagg, as great as he is offensively, is an even better defensive player, you could argue. And then you have St. John's, who's just great on both ends. It's Rick Pitino doing what he does, and that's win a lot of basketball games. They're second in the Big East in points scored. They lead the Big East in points allowed. They've lost 4 games this year. And if you add up how all of those losses and how many points they've lost by a combined 7 points between those 4 losses. They are in every single game that they play. And then there's a gap. Here's our first gap in college basketball between the great teams and the teams that are really good. Okay? And as of today, things can change. If I had to bet money on who was going to win the whole thing, I'd bet on one of those 5 teams, probably Auburn. Then there's this second tier of teams that could win it, but I feel like their weakness is just a little bit more obvious. This is where, like, I would have Wisconsin, who won again last night, just beat the dog out of Illinois. I'd put Tennessee here, Texas A&M, Iowa State, and Houston. Right? They've all got some issues, okay, that I think would result in them losing. That's a little more obvious than those other 5 teams that I mentioned before. Like Wisconsin, they don't play great defense. They're 7th in the Big Ten in points allowed. Tennessee can't score consistently. They're 14th in the SEC in points scored per game. Texas A&M, they don't really score the ball very well either. They're 15th in scoring in the SEC, and they feel offensive rebound dependent, which is not good offense. Iowa State, they're not a great rebounding team. They're 7th in the Big 12 in that regard. Houston is great on the defensive end, as they always are, but as always, they don't really score. They're 9th in points in a Big 12 conference that's not great. Okay, like that. Those are the second tier of teams that could win a national title this season. And if the champ doesn't come out of that group of 10 teams, I wouldn't be surprised because it's March Madness and crazy things happen. But I do strongly believe that one of those 10 teams will win the whole thing. Now, why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing it up because there's probably, like, if I wanted to, I could make a third tier of teams in college basketball that are good enough to win the whole thing. And after watching Purdue in these last 3 games, I don't even think I would put them in that third tier in terms of teams that could win a national title. I don't think Purdue's good enough to make the Elite 8. Okay, are they good enough to make a Sweet 16? I don't know. It kind of feels like they'll need a favorable matchup in the round of 32, like to even make it to the second weekend. And maybe I'm overreacting over 3 games. But like for where I'm at right now, I find it more likely that you could take a rose petal, drop it into the Grand Canyon, and hear the echo. That's more likely than it is for Purdue to make an Elite 8, let alone win a national title this year. And I hate this for Purdue fans because we're going to look back on this season, if you're a Purdue fan, you will. And you're just going to wonder, like, what if Daniel Jacobson just never gets hurt? Or what if Daniel Jacobson only misses like 2 or 3 weeks as opposed to the whole season? Because if they have him, they are a completely different team. That Daniel Jacobson injury is a sliding doors moment. That's what it is. If that does not happen, are we talking about Purdue in the same breath as maybe not Florida and Auburn and those teams, but are we talking about them in the same breath as teams like Wisconsin, who just seems to play better and better every single game? Okay, like that Daniel Jacobson injury is really brutal because they're just small. Purdue is. Like, the book is out on Purdue. Be big and beat them up. That's what Michigan State did last night. That's some of what Wisconsin did. They did it a little differently. They beat them up in the backcourt because they have big guards. Michigan beat Purdue up. Okay, like, they're just small. And we saw it once again last night. Michigan outscored Purdue in the paint 42-24. Michigan State also shot 10 more free throws than Purdue did. Wisconsin put a ton of size on Braden Smith, and he struggled. Robbie Hummel had this stat during the game last night. Wisconsin shot 20 of 22 from inside the paint against Purdue. If you do that, you're probably going to win. Michigan took 18 more free throws than Purdue did, and they outscored them by 12 at the free throw line. That ended up being a major difference in the game. Purdue is small. They do not have the size to compete with a lot of these teams. They had to call on Will Berg last night in like legitimate minutes against Michigan State. Like he was out there like early in, I guess it was probably around the 12-minute mark in the first half. Like Will Berg, who hasn't played since they played Texas A&M Corpus Christi. Okay, like they are desperate for any size. Like they just need big dudes that can just stand there, because that's about all that Will Berg is good for. Okay, they're desperate for any kind of rim protection. They're at the bottom. Literally, they are dead last in the Big Ten and shots blocked per game. They average 1.8 block shots per game. That's pitiful. Okay, and it's hard to win games against good teams when you don't have rim protection, when you only have two offensive options that can legitimately score, when you only have one legitimate ball handler who has to play the entire game. Braden Smith does not come out. Okay, like so many things have to go right for Purdue to even have a chance to beat some of the better teams in the country. They also have to win the turnover battle. Like that has to happen. And if they don't do that, they don't beat good teams. They haven't won the turnover battle in their last 3 games, and they've lost all 3. They turned it over 12 times last night against Michigan State. Michigan State only turned it over 8 times. Against Wisconsin, Purdue was great with the basketball. Turned it over 4 times. The issue, Wisconsin only turned it over 3 times. Against Michigan, both teams turned it over 11 times. Michigan was great there in the second half, only turning the basketball over 3 times in the second half of that game. If you can't defend the rim, then you better force turnovers. Okay, like when Purdue was going good and they were ranked 7th in the country, that's what they were doing. They were forcing a ton of turnovers. Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn were in sync, right? And the turnover aspect of things is so important, not just because it helps you get more shots up than your opponent, but it also gives easy buckets to guys not named Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn. It allows CJ Cox to get out in front and get a layup. Like that's 2 less points that Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn have to score. Okay, and that has just stopped these last few games. They haven't forced enough turnovers. And since that stopped, the winning has stopped with it. Okay, the fact is, like, even with, Purdue even being in these games is a testament to Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn's abilities. It speaks to how good of a basketball player both of those guys are. Like they have to do so much offensively just to keep Purdue in these games. Like Trey Kaufman-Renn, like he has to get 20. It has to happen. Braden Smith has to get 20. Like it has to happen. If those things don't happen, Purdue does not win. Betting on Purdue to beat good teams, like obviously like when they play lesser Big Ten teams, like, I don't know, like Northwestern, like they don't have to do all these things because they're just better. But when they're playing against like legitimately good teams, it feels like you're just kind of putting together a crazy parlay in order for them to win. Like Braden Smith has to score 20 plus points. He has to get 6 or more assists. He has to have under 3.5 turnovers. He had 6 last night, by the way. Trey Kaufman-Renn has to score 20 plus points and grab 8 or more rebounds, and they have to force over 12.5 turnovers, and they have to make over 9.5 threes to win. Like all of those things have to line up and happen for them to beat the better teams in the country. And if I came to you and I was like, hey, bro, I have this amazing parlay cooked up. It's a 7-legger. And it's plus 12,000 or whatever that would be. You'd probably be like, nah, I'm good. I'm probably just going to bet Purdue minus 3.5 It's like this. You feel like the exact same things because Purdue has to do all of those things just to have a chance. And then late in games, they have to figure out a way to close teams out, which isn't hard because they know who they are. And it's Braden Smith, Trey Coffin-Renn, screen and roll at the top. If that doesn't work, Trey Coffin-Renn, here's the ball, go score. Okay, like it is just so hard to beat teams like Wisconsin and Michigan State and Michigan when you are overly reliant on two players and you don't have rim protection. You just have to do so many things right in order to win. And Purdue is tough. They are resilient. Matt Painter is an excellent head coach. Like they could have fallen apart after Daniel Jacobson got hurt. They could have. Like we all knew that they weren't because of who Matt Painter is and how good of a player Braden Smith is. And I don't think anyone expected for Trey Coffin to be this good this year, but I do think that people knew last year that he was a good player. He just didn't get the opportunity because who do you want to give the ball to? Trey Coffin or Zach Edey? I think the answer is Zach Edey for everybody. So just the fact that like Purdue is still probably legitimately one of the 20 best teams in college basketball, despite losing the big that they were going to run a lot of offense through. It's really impressive. It speaks to how good of a player Trey Coffin-Renn and Braden Smith are. It also speaks to Matt Painter and his ability to coach. They still got a few games left. They're not going to lose out. That's not going to happen. They're going to start winning games again because they're a good team. It's probably going to happen on Sunday when they play against IU. Otter Creek chimed in earlier in the show on the YouTube chat, and he asked a simple question of do Purdue struggles make it more or less likely that IU pulls off the win on Sunday? I'm actually going to get into that when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Unadulterated sports talk with unfiltered takes. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket? Thanks for tuning in. No matter how you're tuning in, maybe you're watching on Twitter, _ Jonathan Smith, if you want to follow me there. Maybe you're watching on YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket. If you want to head over there, subscribe, and be part of the conversation. Maybe you're listening via that Indy Sports Ticket app. No matter how you're listening, it is greatly appreciated. Coming up at 11, Max Toscano, a guy who loves tight ends. He's going to join, and we're going to talk quite a bit about Tyler Warren, because that kind of seems like the guy that Colts fans want. They definitely want a tight end, so we'll probably get into a little bit more than just Tyler Warren, but that's not happening quite yet because today's Wednesday. I almost forgot that today was Wednesday. And Wednesday here on this show is also known as Get Over the Hump Day in honor of, Indiana head coach Mike Woodson and his relentless pursuit of getting the Indiana Hoosiers over the hump.
Uh-oh, guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Huh? Anybody? Julie, hey, guess what day it is? Oh, come on, I know you can hear me. Mike. What day is it, Mike? Leslie, guess what today is?
It's hump day.
Woo-hoo! Hump day!
As a coach, I gotta get us over that hump. I gotta get them comfortable, knowing that you're gonna be in close games and you gotta make plays coming down the home stretch. I mean, in the tournament, we were right there. I just didn't get them over the hump, man. And that's something that I live with every day of my life. Because I truly believe that was the team to really make some noise and get to the finals, and I just couldn't get them over the hump.
Mike Woodson, that's what his entire career is about. It's about getting his team over the hump, something that he's never really been able to do, whether you go to his time in the NBA or during his time at IU. And Indiana is 15-11. And they can still somehow, some way make the NCAA tournament. They don't have any bad losses. They've got that one big signature win over Michigan State on the road. Of their losses, only 2 of them have come to teams that are currently not projected to be in the NCAA tournament. Okay, those 2 losses are to Northwestern and Iowa. Those aren't terrible losses. Like they aren't resume killers. So the Hoosiers have that great win over Michigan State, but they need one more, which is why that game on Sunday is so important. I think that if they win out, then they're a lock to be in. Okay, because that's a win over Purdue. That's a win over Michigan State, and no bad losses, along with some other decent wins there along the way. Ohio State twice, Penn State twice, Oregon on the road, and Washington on the road. Okay, but obviously, in order for that to happen, they'd have to beat this struggling Purdue team at home on Sunday. And, Otter Creek asked earlier if I thought that Purdue struggling would help or hurt IU. I think it's going to hurt them because playing against good teams that are struggling is just not fun. Like, there's just a little more focus. There's a little bit more energy to get off this losing streak. Like, this isn't something that Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer and Trey Copp and Wren, the rest of these juniors, like, that's not something that they've dealt with during their time at Purdue. They are not accustomed to losing. Like, it's just like, they haven't during their time at Purdue. And so I wouldn't want to play Purdue right now because of the struggles that they have going on right now. But Indiana can definitely beat Purdue. They could have, I'm not going to say that they should have, but they could have beaten them in West Lafayette earlier this year. Seriously. Like, Purdue didn't shoot the ball very well in that game, but, Indiana on the offensive glass was just relentless, especially in that first half. They didn't keep that up in the second half, and so they lost. But McKenzie and Baco had a day because Purdue just doesn't have anybody to really guard him. They have Camden Heide. Yeah, but Camden Heide's a 0 on offense, so they don't really want to put him on the floor. So they were like, Fletcher Lawyer, you're going to guard the 6'7" guy who can dribble, pass, and shoot. Good luck. Okay, Indiana can beat Purdue. I have no doubt about it, just because they're a tough matchup for them. Matt Painter, when he went on the Dan Dockett show, which is right here from noon to 3 today, when he came on earlier in the year, and he talked about IU, that was his biggest concern. He was like, they are big and we are not. Okay, Indiana has an overwhelming amount of size. Malik Renew is playing much better now than he was back, a month ago when they went to West Lafayette. Malik Renew is starting to play like the guy that we saw last year. That was pretty good throughout Big Ten play. Okay, so can IU win this game? Abso-freaking-lutely they can. Will they? I don't know. It's Purdue, and I know that they've lost 3 in a row, and I know that this is a tough matchup for them. But I struggle to pick against them. I picked them last night. Okay, so if Indiana can win that game on Sunday, then I think they'll have a pretty decent chance to win out and make the tournament. Here's the rest of their schedule. So they have Purdue at home. Then they get Penn State at home. They should win that game. They go to Washington. They should win that game. Washington really struggles to score the ball. And then they go to Oregon. Oregon's a good team. Then they close their season out with Ohio State at home. They could win out, but they probably won't. Even though they're a tough matchup for Purdue, and they are more talented than every other team on their schedule, with the exception, probably including Purdue. But they won't. And the reason why I'm hesitant to pick them against Purdue, even though Purdue's struggling, is because Indiana they are the definition of inconsistent this year. Seriously, they are so up and down. And I don't mean in terms of wins and losses, because when you look at the teams that they've beaten and the teams that they've lost to, with the exception of beating Michigan State, it's a pretty consistent thing. But within games, they are up and they are down. That's just they seem to get down big in every game that they play, and then they come roaring back, or they somehow, some way figure out a way to go up 10, and then the other team comes roaring back. That's just kind of what I've come to expect from watching Indiana games this year. And when you're that inconsistent, I don't think that you can beat teams like Purdue. Sorry, I don't think that they can. So as of right now, I'm leading Purdue. We'll see who I end up picking on Friday, though. And this game is it's going to be really big for them, because if they beat Purdue, that gives them, I think, a little bit more breathing room. If they beat them and then they lose one of those other games to Penn State or Washington or Oregon or Ohio State, then I think that they still get in, because once again, they don't have any bad losses. They'll have 2 great wins over Purdue and Michigan State. So Mike Woodson can take what's been a pretty not good year and finish on a high note by getting this Indiana team into the NCAA tournament. I wouldn't bet on it, though. I wouldn't in the slightest, because, as I mentioned, Indiana is just the definition of up and down with no stability. Okay, they are up and down, and I don't like betting on teams that play that way. Speaking of betting, the odds for Super Bowl 60 are out. And here's just a reminder that going into year 9 of Chris Ballard, the Indianapolis Colts are nowhere close to the Super Bowl. Not even remotely close. The odds for Super Bowl 60 came out, and the Eagles are the favorite to repeat at plus 650. Those odds are a little lower than what I kind of thought that they'd be. The Chiefs are right behind them at plus 700. And then you have the Colts. The Colts are plus 8,500 to win the Super Bowl. To put that in perspective of how bad this Colts team is, the Jacksonville Jaguars are plus 6,000. The difference between the Jaguars, who I think everyone around Indianapolis would agree, it doesn't feel like they're in a great spot. Yeah, no, they had their odds or the Colts odds are 2,500 points higher than the Jaguars. The Bears, who I believe have a top 10 pick this year. If it's not top 10, they're close. The Bears are plus 4,900 with a second-year quarterback that wasn't very good last year. And an offensive line that's just not very good. The Dolphins are plus 4,200 with Tua taking snaps, a bad defense, and a head coach that people have questions about. The Bengals, who missed the playoffs like the Colts did last year, are plus 1,700. And I get it. They have Joe Burrow and the Colts don't. Like that one I totally understand. But here's the thing that's really surprising. There are only 8 teams in the NFL with higher odds to win the Super Bowl than the Colts. That's the Giants, the Titans, the Browns, the Raiders, teams like that. And Jim Irsay was like, nah, let's run it back. And, I think a lot of this is going to come back on Anthony Richardson, right? And look, like, bash him all you want. He hasn't been very good, all that kind of stuff. I get it. But it's more than just that. Like, this defense isn't very good. The offense, yes, it all starts with Richardson, but the offense isn't very good either. Like, their best wide receiver is Michael Pittman Jr., who's a solid player. The best player on their offense is their left guard. Like, come on. And so, sure, like, a lot of the odds are pretty, dependent upon who your quarterback is. That's why, the Bengals are plus 1,700 and, the Colts are plus 8,500. But it's also about the roster as a whole. And this Colts roster as a whole is just not very good. And we're going to run it back. We're going into year 9. I feel pretty confident as to who's going to be the quarterback brought in to be the competition for Anthony Richardson next year. I've got a whole thing for tomorrow, plans that I'm going to talk about that. And it doesn't make me feel any better. I have no excitement for the Indianapolis Colts this next season. If I was you, I wouldn't build my days around whenever the Colts play. I wouldn't. Because this team is, I can tell you right now, they're going to go 7-10. Maybe they go 9-8. They'll go somewhere in there. If they go 9-8, maybe they make the playoffs as the wild card. And, the team that they need to lose in week 18 loses. And maybe all of that happens. Okay. And the Colts sneak in, and then Jim Irsay can walk away and be like, hey, we're going to play more than one game in 2026. But, I mean, if you're a Colts fan and you want to hang your hat on anything, you can hang it on the fact that the Colts are undefeated in 2025. So I have no excitement. And why should I when the Colts are plus 8,500 to win the Super Bowl? I wish that they had odds out on what the Colts were to make the playoffs. Because when you look at the division, I just they're not going to be better than Houston. I don't think they're going to be better than Jacksonville unless, Jacksonville ends up moving Trevor Lawrence. Liam Cohen, this new head coach that they've brought in, I do expect him to help Trevor Lawrence be a little bit better. But, the Colts should be better than the Titans. I don't even think that that's guaranteed because, maybe Cam Ward shows up and Cam Ward's a beast and he's a really good player right off the rip. And all of a sudden, he's the new Jaden Daniels, and the Titans go 11-6, and they win the division, and the Colts are sitting at the bottom at 6-11, and then we're doing everything next offseason that we should have done this offseason, which is fire Chris Ballard. The only difference is next year they'll probably fire Shane Steichen and the rest of this coaching staff with them. So once again, if I was you, there's not a chance I would build my Sundays around the Indianapolis Colts playing football because they're just simply put not a very good football team. But I would start building my days around the NBA, which I already do. I do that in October because I don't know, I have no life, I guess. The NBA sprint to the finish starts tonight. The Pacers sprint to the finish starts tomorrow night. I've got thoughts on this because the Pacers kind of struggled after coming back from Paris, and there's one thing in particular that has to happen in order for the Pacers to make another run to the Eastern Conference Finals, even with all these other teams actually being healthy. I do think it's possible, but this one very specific thing has to happen. I'm going to tell you what that is when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Often imitated, never duplicated. The real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether you're listening on, the Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you get your apps. Maybe you're watching on Twitter or YouTube, YouTube being Indy's Sports Ticket, no matter how you're tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. Max Toscano is set to join the show coming up here in about 20 minutes to talk about Tyler Warren. Max is all about tight ends. He writes about tight ends. He's all about it. All right. So once again, that's coming up here in about 20 minutes if you want to know the latest on Tyler Warren, how he fits in the Colts offense, and all of those things. So the NBA's sprint to the finish starts tonight, and the Pacers starts tomorrow night. Every team has around 30 games left. The Pacers have 29. The Lakers and the Hornets play tonight to kind of restart the NBA season after what was a terrible excuse for an all-star break. And, once again, the Pacers, they're playing tomorrow night. I think that the NBA, there's 3 different parts of the season, and there's 3 different speeds with which those parts operate at. Okay, so before Christmas, start of the season in October, teams are kind of easing into things. Teams are playing 11 guys a night. Like they're going deep in their rotation, just trying to get everybody's legs underneath them. They're trying to see how rookies are going to adjust. This player didn't have very good training camp. He's kind of balling out in these games. Maybe I need to give him a little bit more time. All those different types of things, right? Like that first third of the season from October to Christmas, teams are just kind of easing into things. And then after Christmas and before the All-Star break, late December through mid-February part of the season, teams are settled in. Okay? Like they're settled in. They're, playing maybe not hard, but they are, but they're, a little more consistent. Like rotations get cut down. Teams are playing 9 guys a night instead of using their whole bench. Like all of those things are kind of what starts to happen, but they're also not leaving it out on the floor every night. Like this isn't playoff level basketball. There are some nights and some games where some teams will mail it in. Think the Celtics losing to the Dallas Mavericks when they didn't have a center. Like no Anthony Davis, no Luka, nobody like that. Klay Thompson goes crazy and the Mavericks win that game. Right? So there are still games where teams will mail it in. And then you have the time of the year that we're about to enter, where teams are jockeying for position for playoff seeding. Right from the end of the All-Star break to the end of the season, teams ratchet it all the way up to a level that I think is just below playoff level intensity until they know what their seeding is for the playoffs. Okay, like once the Celtics, once the Cavaliers clinch the 1 seed, they'll probably tone it down. When the Celtics finally clinch the 2 seed, they'll wind it down again, so on and so forth. Okay. So we're about to see teams really start playing basketball to get ready for the playoffs. And we're going to see teams like the Wizards really start tanking for that number 1 overall pick. The sprint to the finish is a fun 30-ish games to watch, for me at least, every single year. And last year when this time came around, we saw the Pacers take a major step in the right direction. They started really playing defense. Tyrese Halliburton was finally healthy from that hamstring injury. Pascal Siakam finally settled in. And we saw them really kind of turn it on before that trip to Paris this year. Okay? And, they're winning all these games, and I'm on here. I'm talking about how great the team is, top 5 in defensive rating, all that kind of stuff. They come back from Paris, and in those 8 games between returning from Paris and the All-Star break, the Pacers struggled. Like, they were bad. They were 5-3. Their offensive rating was 15th in the NBA. Their defensive rating was 117.6. And their net rating was -2. That's 18th in the NBA. And they were 30th in rebounding. Like, they didn't start to play well. And that's not a great way to head into the All-Star break. But glass half full, Miles Turner did miss some time. Right? He missed some of those games. The Pacers need Miles Turner. He makes them a better rebounding team. He makes them a better shooting team. And he makes them a better defensive team because he can actually protect the rim. And he should be good to go to play tomorrow night because, he was put in concussion protocol because Benedict Mathurin hit him in the face. Not on purpose, obviously, but that's what happened. Anyway, hopefully for these last 30 games, we see the Pacers return to what they looked like before that trip to Paris, a top 5 defense in the NBA. and also a top 10 offense in the NBA. Because if you're both of those things, then you should win a lot of games, and you should have a great chance to win a lot of games in the playoffs. But in order for that to happen, in order for the offense to be top 10, in order for the defense to be top 5, in order for the Pacers to have a legitimate chance to return to the Eastern Conference Finals, Tyrese Halliburton has to be great. Bleacher Report released an article yesterday where they ranked the best players of every age in the NBA. Okay, so it's like the best 19-year-old is Alex Sarr, the number 2 overall pick from this previous draft class. The best 23-year-old is Anthony Edwards. They ranked Tyrese Halliburton as the best 24-year-old in the NBA. Right? Which, sounds impressive. And just so you know, here are some of the other notable 24-year-olds. Zion Williamson, Tyrese Maxey, and Trey Murphy III, a guy who's having an awesome season down there in New Orleans that no one's really paying much attention to. Okay, so he's a good player. And there are a lot of things to like about Tyrese Halliburton. He makes his teammates better. He just always seems to make the correct decision with the basketball, which leads to him finding, his teammates in the right spots, which allows them to be better than what they probably actually are. He's an efficient scorer for his career. He had a season last year where he was named to, the third team All-NBA. In other words, he was one of the 15 best players in the league last year because if you don't remember, they restructured how they do All-NBA, and it's just like the 5 best, 6 through 10, and then 11 through 15. That's how these guys are supposed to vote now. The best version of Tyrese Halliburton can win the Pacers a lot of games. And I don't think we've gotten that from him this year. Scoring's down, not because the efficiency's down, but because he's just not taking as many shots as he did last year, which just isn't right because he's a good scorer. I wish he would take 18 shots a game because he's good enough to take that many shots. He's that good of an offensive player. And when he's scoring the basketball, he makes the Pacers much tougher to stop. He and Braden Smith, I think, are very similar in that regard. Purdue goes to a whole new level when Braden Smith is consistently scoring the basketball. The Pacers offense goes to a whole different level when Tyrese Halliburton is actually a threat to score and he's driving to the rim to get a bucket as opposed to driving to the rim to drop it off or kick it out for a 3. Speaking of him getting into the lane, there's something that he's doing this year that kind of drives me crazy. He's not getting to the rim enough. Tyrese Halliburton is shooting 72% this year at the rim. It's the second highest mark of his career. And that's a pretty elite number, honestly, for a point guard. For reference, Miles Turner, a center, is shooting 73% at the rim this season. From 3 to 10 feet away from the basket, Tyrese Halliburton is making 56% of those shots. For comparison, Miles Turner, a center, is only making 41% of those shots. Tyrese Halliburton in the lane is an excellent weapon for this Pacers team because he's a great scorer when he gets 2 feet in the paint. And obviously he's a great shooter as well. But when he gets in the lane, he can score, and he's a great passer, as we all know, and he's able to kick out to shooters and drop the ball off to Miles Turner or Toppin or whoever for dunks and all of those things. And the issue this year, and the reason why I don't think we're getting the absolute best version of Tyrese Halliburton whenever we watch the Pacers play, is he's just not getting to the rim enough. Only 12% of Tyrese Halliburton's shots this year have come at the rim. That's the lowest of his career. And one of the lowest percentages of any high volume scorer, of any guy that takes, 13 or more shots a game. And he's simply too good at the rim to not get there more. He simply settles for too many threes. And I'm Mr. You better shoot the 3 ball well. Okay? But he's got to quit settling for threes, and he has to get the ball to the rim more. He's too good of a passer and finisher to only have 12% of his shots come at the rim. And this is, for me, I'd like to think, a pretty easy fix. Give him some more ball screens, let him get downhill, allow him to make more plays from inside the lane. He's a great shooter, so he should still take between 7 and 8 threes a game. That's where he's at on the season. He should just take more shots at the rim. Like, get the shot attempts from 14 to 18. And with those extra 4 shots coming at the rim. And the Pacers will be a better basketball team for it, with a chance to make a run to the Eastern Conference Finals. Because if Halliburton's taking 4 more shots, like, that's less shots for Obi Toppin, who's a really good player. But I would rather have Tyrese Halliburton shoot the ball than Obi Toppin. As long as Halliburton's shots aren't pulling away from Pascal Siakam's, then like let him get the ball up more. I love TJ McConnell, but there should never be a game where TJ McConnell takes more shots than Tyrese Halliburton. That just simply should never happen. Benedict Mathurin, unless he's got it going great, there should never be a game where Benedict Mathurin takes more shots than Tyrese Halliburton. Okay, like we sat back and we watched the playoffs last year. You and I both. And the difference was so obvious as to when Tyrese Halliburton was aggressive offensively versus when he wasn't. And when he was, the Pacers offense clicked and it moved and the ball bounced around and they consistently got good looks. And when he was passive and, he'd have these stretches where he'd just kind of float and you didn't even notice that he was on the floor, and they'd sub him out and you'd be like, oh, Tyrese Halliburton was on the floor for the last 5 minutes. I didn't even notice him. Like, he brought the ball up, he gave it up, and then he never got it back. Like, that just can't happen. Okay, because Andrew Nembhard, who had a really good playoff run last year, hasn't been as consistent of an offensive guy this year. Like, he hasn't been. Aaron Nesmith isn't shooting the ball as well as he did last year, and that's okay. It just means that Tyrese Halliburton has to take on a greater responsibility of looking to score the basketball. And I would just prefer it if those, opportunities for him to score came at the rim. Coming up here in about, 5 minutes or so, 11 o'clock, Max Toscano is going to join the show. He writes about football. He loves tight ends. He wrote an amazing piece on his Substack talking about, Tyler Warren, this tight end that people are just kind of infatuated with because, he was really good at Penn State. Like when they needed to pick up a first down, they were going to throw the ball to Tyler Warren. And when you look at the Colts, what do they need? A tight end. That is what they need for multiple reasons. I think he would be a great pick for the Colts at 14. And talking to Max last night, he thinks that, the Colts would have to trade up. I'm going to ask him why. I'm going to ask him who he thinks would kind of be the team to take Tyler Warren, but before the Colts, and why. It's going to be really good. The dude's really smart. He understands. He was, he worked with UConn football there for a bit. So like he knows some stuff. Like he's a smart guy. I'm very excited to have him on. He said to join the show coming up here at 11 o'clock. In the next hour, we'll run it back. We'll talk a little bit more Purdue. We'll talk about just a lot more college basketball. It is Wednesday, which means it's Get Over the Hump Day in honor of Mike Woodson's relentless pursuit of getting over the hump. So we'll talk a little bit more IU hoops. But when we come back here in about 5 minutes, Max Toscano is going to join, and we're going to talk a little Tyler Warren too, the Indianapolis Colts.
It's time for the real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? Welcome to the real Jonathan Smith Show. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket, if you want to head over there and subscribe. Maybe you're watching it on Twitter, _ Jonathan Smith, if you want to follow me there. Also follow our new guest, Max Toscano. You can follow him on Twitter at Max Toscano1. Max, what's going on, man? How are you?
No, just hanging out, watching a bunch of tape today. Got a handful of tight ends to watch today, and I'm just grinding it.
So you're the new tight end guru. That's kind of how I imagine you. And I'm curious, why do you like tight ends so much?
Well, it's funny. I was watching a recruit. I cover LSU football a little bit, X's and O's for End the Valley Shook at SB Nation as well. And this was right when I first got the job. I was watching a recruit who's a tight end who was an incredible player. Unfortunately, a lot of things really didn't work out for him. It was Eric Gilbert, who transferred to a bunch of different schools and all that. But watching him in high school, watching the 6'5", 250-pound guy run around and move like that, and the amount that it affords you schematically when a guy is that big and can move around and create with the ball and get open and add in the passing game and attach to the formation and be that sixth offensive lineman. In many ways, to me, they're almost the ultimate football players. And I really like versatility in all sports. It's just kind of something I like. I love defensive forwards in hockey. I love, your two-way combo guards in basketball, all that stuff. But with tight ends specifically, it's just the physical freakiness of it all, to be able to break down defensive backs in space and then go bury defensive ends that a guy like George Kittle can do. That is just it really is kind of one of the coolest things in the game of football to me.
Joined by Max Toscano, who, as he mentions, writes for And the Valley Shook. He also has a Substack called Remember the Tight End. And if you look at his Twitter page, his pinned tweet says, "Welcome to Remember the Tight Ends, a publication dedicated to the discussion of a misunderstood position." What is misunderstood about tight ends?
Well, it's the blocking aspect, in large part. I think that a lot of people view tight ends as just another pass catcher. But when we drill down at that a little bit deeper and sort of examine that a little bit more critically, we have to think about, if you're just viewing the tight end as another pass catcher, why would you not just use a wide receiver? There's a position for that, right? And they do it better than the tight ends. Like, if you look at tight end production in receiving, an elite tight end season is barely pushing 1,000 yards, and you'll get, B to B plus level receivers clearing 1,000 yards all the time. And when you look at it schematically, just the range of routes that those guys can run versus a tight end body is totally different. So when you think about it, what actually makes a tight end different from any other position? Why do you need a tight end on the field? And it's the combination of inline blocking and at least functional pass catching. And so I think that people don't really understand that this is first and foremost a blocking position from an X's and O's perspective, from what coaches are doing. And if you get a guy that is not really able to block in line, it ends up pigeonholing you significantly in terms of what you can come out in and just play in, right? So if you want to be in 3 wide receivers with only 1 tight end, and that guy can't block in line and is, a flex only guy, functionally you're in 4 wide receivers. And that doesn't really work in the NFL because teams will just sell out against the pass and choke out your whole offense. So I think what people don't really understand is how important the inline blocking aspect is, unless you are like a Travis Kelce or Brock Bowers who can functionally play wide receiver, so that when you're taking that third receiver off the field for them, you don't miss anything. It's not a cherry on top of their game. In fact, in general, like, the receiving is in many ways the cherry, which is I think something that people don't really think about, because I think we all like the exciting parts of the game, right? We don't really want to eat our vegetables, but unfortunately we kind of have to.
Yeah, no, that all makes sense. Joined by Max Toscano, who writes about tight ends at the Remember the Tight Ends Substack, also covers a little bit of LSU football at And the Valley Shook. So you spent some time as a defensive and analytics guy for UConn football. How did your time there shape how you view tight ends?
It shaped it a lot, especially spending time on the defensive side of the ball and knowing, what we have to honor and what we respect and what we don't respect and viewing, and I don't mean that in a moral sense. I mean that, what we have to commit resources to on the field, kind of sense. And just sort of understanding that defense, that if you put quote unquote imposters anywhere, right? Like if you put a wide receiver in the backfield for purposes of getting him out in the route, if you put a guy who can't block at tight end, like defenses are going to sniff stuff out. So what I kind of realized is that to make defense really, really hard to play, you need to be able to access as much as possible in your offense, your run game, your heavy run game, your drop back pass game, your play action game, all that from the same stuff, so that defenses can't key in on everything. And that's sort of what a true elite two-way tight end, of which there are so few, is the ultimate, piece on the chessboard for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I am curious your thoughts. Like, there's been a lot of conversation about Travis Kelce after the Super Bowl and just his regression. Why has he regressed, and where has he regressed the most?
I mean, Travis Kelce ultimately kind of regressed because he's 34 years old, and he's played for so long at such a high level. It's hard to be a 250-pound space player when you get to a certain age. Like even most wide receivers, they have fallen off even before Kelce's age. So I mean, Kelce just it's just kind of time. Whether it's this year or next year, it's he's just he lost out to Father Time. Unfortunately, Father Time has claimed everybody but Tom Brady, basically. And I don't think there's any real football reason for it. I just think he's just lost a step or two.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Being 34 and trying to play tight end, especially him, because he doesn't come off as the most physical guy in the world. Like I'm kind of moving now more to Tyler Warren, a guy who fans here in Indianapolis really want for the Colts to draft, joined by Max Toscano, who writes a Substack called Remember the Tight End. He loves tight ends. He also writes for And the Valley Shook, covering some X's and O's for LSU football. I think the one thing that really sticks out to me about Tyler Warren is how physical he is. Does that stick out for you as well whenever you watch him?
Yeah, he's really rare. When you look at a guy who blocks in line on defensive ends the way that he does, you tend to see that in the block only guys. You tend to see that in your Brock Wrights, your Drew Samples, Josh Olivers, like these kinds of guys. And the guys who are focused more on receiving, many of them are serviceable in line, which is all they need to be to not create schematic limitations. And that does not apply necessarily to guys like Kelce and Bowers, who are more true wide receivers, honestly. But I mean, they're very good at it, but they still are. With Warren, he is so sound technically as a blocker. It's not, obviously he's 260. He's strong as hell. He will move you. He will throw you into the ground. But it's the hand placement. It's the fact that his weight's always behind him. It's that he understands the concepts really well and where he's trying to protect from the defender. It's so rare for a guy who is actually really good in space, insanely athletic, great with the ball in his hands, and is a legitimate route runner and developing route runner. So, like, to me, the physicality stands out, not necessarily in a vacuum, even though it is truly elite on its own. It's what he does in context with the rest of his game, which is just like, those guys are genuinely rarer than elite quarterbacks. I mean, there are more elite quarterbacks than there are true elite two-way tight ends in the NFL. The only ones I can really think of are obviously George Kittle and Dallas Goedert, who are both elite blockers and receivers. So like it stands out to me even more so in context with the rest of his skill set.
That makes sense. Who does Tyler Warren remind you of?
I'm really hesitant to drop this, and I've never used it before just because, again, these players are so rare, but he does remind me of George Kittle. And he's the only one that since I started watching these guys, that I would ever come close to saying that about, especially as they were coming out of the draft. Like even George Kittle wasn't like this in college, which is what's so unusual about Warren. But when you look at, again, the combination of not functional inline blocking, not good inline blocking, but dominant inline blocking, and pretty incredible burst after the catch. Like his first step and go is legit. He's not necessarily the most purely refined route runner, but honestly, neither is George Kittle. What he's all about is spacing the field in the middle, getting into space and creating huge after the catch. And that's why he's such a damn explosive receiver. Like, people always make money on those George Kittle longest reception props because he is their most explosive guy. And so like, yeah, he's a good route runner, and Warren is a good route runner as well, but it's all about that ability to space the field and create after the catch, combined with that ability to wash guys down on the line of scrimmage and truly dominate, which is, again, makes them kind of the ultimate chess pieces, but ultimately really explosive players rather than your singles and doubles receivers that a lot of tight ends are, where they're kind of working the underneath windows, working the middle. Yeah, Warren's doing that stuff too, but he's doing that to stretch the seams. He's doing that to create after the catch and make sort of big plays. So that's really the comparison. And again, it's the first comparison I've really dropped this cycle, which is the first cycle I've really been super big publicly on all the tight ends, but I don't drop that comparison lightly.
Yeah, that's good. Joined by Max Toscano, who's a football writer for And the Valley Shook, and he also writes a Substack called Remember the Tight End. We're talking a little Tyler Warren because Colts fans want him here in Indy. When we were setting this up last night, you mentioned that the Colts might have to trade up to draft Tyler Warren. Who are the teams in front of them that Tyler Warren would be a good fit for?
I think the Jets will love him. Aaron Glenn is going to love him just as an identity guy. Tanner Engstrand, who is the tight ends coach in Detroit, is now their offensive coordinator. That is an offense that is heavily dependent on what their tight end Laporta can do. They rely on him a lot running the ball at 11 personnel. Like, he's developed a lot as a blocker. So when they want to get into 3 wide, they obviously still want to be able to run the hell out of the football and set up play action, all that stuff. So they need him to do that, and he's done that at a high level. And without him, it would really be tough to be as positionless as they are on offense. So I think that he's going to understand the value of that. And I think that they're a team that doesn't necessarily, they have needs, but they are not in dire straits the way a lot of the top 10 teams often are. Whereas they have a lot of good players. Like, they have some foundational pieces at receiver. On the offense, they have a really good offensive line, honestly. They have guys at DB. They have okay linebackers. Obviously, you probably wouldn't take one of them with 7 anyway. The edge rushers aren't necessarily amazing, but they have some promise there. And they have Quinnen Williams on the interior D line. So I'm not calling Tyler Warren a luxury pick, because he's not. But they aren't in a spot where they are in desperate need of filling their, top shelf positions. So I think it's going to be, it's hard for me to imagine them not taking a serious look at that. And I think a sleeper is the 49ers. I think that Kyle Shanahan obviously knows what George Kittle is. He knows how important to the offense Kittle is. Kittle is getting older, and he plays a brand of football that tends not to age well because of how physical and violent it is. So I'm not saying Kittle's going to fall off the map this year or even next year, but Tyler Warrens do not come along very often. They just don't. Like Brock Bowers was a great prospect, but he was not this kind of player stylistically. He's an F. He's closer to Cooper Kupp than he is to George Kittle, which is not a criticism because that's really cool. But for what Kyle Shanahan needs out of that position, these guys really, really don't come along very often. And he can maybe get a less good one, but if he wants to off-ramp Kittle eventually and roll both of them a lot next year at the same time, which would be overpowering in the run and pass game, just overpower, replace Juszczyk at the F a little bit with Tyler Warren. You add so much more passing and so much more blocking. That would be overpowered. And then, you can kind of get Kittle a little bit away from the line of scrimmage in the immediate term, just to kind of load manage him a little bit as he gets a little older, and then potentially off ramp him in a year or two, and then you've actually replaced him. So I think that's a super sleeper. I know they have huge needs at interior D line, but they're still a really, really good team that was just beset by injuries last year. So they're in position to make a pick like that. And it would be crazy on the surface to people because they have Kittle, but looking long term or even medium term and honestly short term because of what those guys would do together, I think that would be really exciting. They're ahead of the Colts as well.
Joined by Max Toscano talking about Tyler Warren. Max loves tight ends. Clearly, your gushing's probably a little strong, but you clearly loved Tyler Warren as a prospect. Would it be worth the Colts trading up in front of the 49ers and the Jets to try and grab him?
Well, I mean, it depends because, I do think the Colts have significant needs on defense, especially at corner, and this is a really good corner class. So there could be value there. But I mean, as far as completing the offense, I don't think it would be a misuse of resources to do. I guess it would depend on the cost. I don't think moving up from 14 to 7 in a class without quarterbacks necessarily, certainly not there, is going to be too expensive. I guess it would just depend on the cost because the Colts, a great receiving Y tight end would be pretty overpowering for Indianapolis, but they don't necessarily need pass catchers. All they need from the tight end position schematically is a very good blocker. So you can find that later in the class. Like you could maybe get even like a CJ Dipree really, really late and just use him as a blocker. Or maybe a Gunnar Helm or Mason Taylor who need to develop a little bit as blockers, but have the ingredients and can also catch the ball. So I don't think it depends on the price. Like there's no denying that that Tyler Warren in that Dallas Goedert role and Shane Steichen's offense would be pretty insane for them, and it would help them so much in the run game and the pass game. But I guess it just would depend on the price.
Yeah, that makes sense. How big of a gap is there between Tyler Warren and the rest of the tight ends in this class? Because seems like there's a lot of good tight ends, but how big is that gap between Warren and the rest of them?
I'm a big fan of Colston Loveland. I think he's a first-round player, and I love him a lot. The gap is gigantic. The gap is enormous. It's as big of a gap as exists between 1 and 2 in this class, except maybe quarterback, because I do kind of like Cam Ward now. But it's huge. It's huge. This is the guy I would take if he went in the top 5 in where Kyle Pitts went. I think that would be a better use of resources, and that would not be something that I think would be a bad. I think it would ruffle feathers, but I don't think it would be a bad pick. So he's that kind of player. He's just that kind of player. And the gap is just. It's not that the rest of the class is bad. The class is quite good, but the gap is still big.
Okay. Joined by Max Toscano talking about Tyler Warren and the rest of these tight ends. Max writes a Substack called remember the tight end where he talks about all the tight ends, and it's great. You should go read his piece on Tyler Warren because it's absolutely fantastic. So is the gap big just because of the blocking? Like, is that why the gap is as wide as it is?
Yeah. I think that Colson Loveland is a better pure route runner. While I do think Tyler Warren's a more explosive player because of the burst after the catch and the overall athletic ridiculousness that he has. I think as far as pure like in space route runners, Loveland is a little bit better, but like he combines the blocking of like a CJ Dupree or Jackson Hawes, who are viewed as these block only maulers, with unmatched explosiveness and receiving that is somewhat competitive to a Colson Loveland. So like, yeah, it's you're kind of missing an infinity stone with it's not to say Colson Loveland is a pretty decent blocker, and I think he can be functional in the Y spot when you need him to be, which is enough for that player to be valuable, sort of like a Trey McBride. But I mean, it's similar to the gap between George Kittle and Trey McBride, which is, it's pretty massive.
Yeah.
As great as Trey McBride is.
Okay, that makes sense. I want to touch a little bit on the route running of Tyler Warren. Now, to be fair, like I haven't watched as much tape on him as you clearly have, but like from what I remember watching, 6 Penn State games this year, it felt like a lot of the Tyler Warren receptions was just him like boxing people out. So I guess how does that play into him being a good route runner, and I guess how much polish does he need in that part of his game?
He needs a little bit. There are moments, especially when they get him at the Y and he gets matched up on linebackers where he's just toasting people and getting wide ass open. But I think generally he could use a little bit of refinement, but all the things I've come across are just small details, right? It's when are you going to use a press release versus a space release? When are you going to, try to, arm over a guy and undo leverage instead of running through him? When are you going to just add these little details into your routes that more experienced players at the position tend to have? Again, he's switching from quarterback in high school. So this is just stuff he's going to pick up, I think, as he ages as a player. It's really small, teachable stuff. Really, really small, but detailed stuff. You look at TJ Hawkinson, he's so detailed in his routes, very deceptive. Just adding a little bit of that element, and I think he's good to go. Joined
by Max Toscano, talking about Tyler Warren, who is far and away the best tight end in this draft class. You've convinced me, Max. Like you're very persuasive when it comes to this guy. Last thing, and I'll let you go. Like Tyler Warren played quarterback in high school. How unprecedented is it for him to be this good this quickly at playing tight end?
Honestly, it's not that unprecedented because tight end is kind of the position change position in many ways. It's so moldable if you have the right coordination and athletic skill set and physical profile. Like you got to be big, you got to be decently athletic. So, like, I mean, you look at guys like Antonio Gates who switched from basketball. Mo Alley Cox switched from basketball. So there have been actually more extreme changes than this. And the switch from quarterback is actually not that uncommon. Anytime you get a big quarterback who's somewhat athletic, who's not necessarily like a next level passer, they'll move him to tight end. At UConn, we actually have a kid that's who was a quarterback at TCU who we moved to tight end, who's really becoming a nice player. So it's actually not that unprecedented.
Okay. Last thing here for real. Would Anthony Richardson be a good tight end?
Dude, I'm hovering around Anthony Richardson like the Grim Reaper, just trying to claim him for the tight ends. Like it's almost time, Anthony, to accept your destiny. No, I actually, he shouldn't give up on quarterback. He hasn't had enough. He hasn't had enough reps to know really what he is. We got to see more because he's got so much talent. But yeah, he would potentially be an insane tight end, like insanely gifted. When I saw his combine at 6'5", 245, we just got to put like and he can put 10 more pounds on pretty easily if he were going to switch positions, he would be a monster at tight end. So if it doesn't work out at quarterback, there is another way. He can have another shot at this.
Okay, that's good, because that's kind of been a bit of a joke here, because like when you complete 48% of your passes, like it doesn't inspire confidence in your ability to play quarterback.
No, it was a tough year. It was rough.
Yeah, it wasn't great. I watched every ball he threw, and it was brutal. Max, thanks for your time, man. We'll have to get you on again after sometime, either like right before or right after the draft, just to kind of see where Tyler Warren ends up, man. Thanks for your time, dude. You were great.
Awesome. Thank you, man. This was a lot of fun.
Cool. Thanks. That is Max Toscano. You can follow him on Twitter at Max Toscano1. He loves football, loves tight ends. His Substack is outstanding. Got a comment from the Twitter chat, which doesn't happen very often, and I sadly can't respond to those. Pete Veo chiming in saying someone is going to jump the Colts for Tyler Warren. That's what Max made it sound like. He said that he thinks that the Jets would really like him, and that maybe the 49ers as well, because he can do a lot of the things that George Kittle can do right now. So we'll wait, and we'll have to wait and see. I want him now. Like, after that conversation, I'm like, I want the Colts to draft Tyler Warren more than anything else right now, because of everything that Max just said. Make sure you go and check out all of his stuff. We'll make sure to have him on one more time, either before or right after the NFL draft. When we come back here in a couple of minutes, Indiana basketball, Purdue basketball, where are they headed? More specifically, Purdue, where do they kind of measure up in terms of the rest of the, world of college basketball? All that coming your way here in about 4 minutes.
Unfiltered takes live here. The Real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Big thanks to Max Toscano for taking 25 minutes to hop on the show and talk about Tyler Warren. A lot of just heavy opinions on him. Like, he was gushing over him is probably a bit much, but he clearly likes him as a prospect. Purdue basketball, man, like, they've lost 3 in a row. It's just brutal. And they are just nowhere close to the top of college basketball. They went on that run. You know, they were ranked 7th in the country. And it was like maybe, you know, there's like, maybe they got something going on. And now they've lost 3 in a row to 3 good teams in Michigan, Wisconsin, and now Michigan State last night. And the book on how to beat them, like, it's out. It's pretty clear. Be big, beat them up inside. Okay, that's what Michigan State did last night. They won by 9. That's what Michigan did. They won that game. Wisconsin was bigger than Purdue, and they also won. Okay, Michigan outscored Purdue in the paint 42-24, and they shot 10 more free throws than Purdue. Okay, Wisconsin put size on Braden Smith, and he struggled. 2 of 10 from the floor. Not great. Wisconsin also shot 20 of 22 from inside the paint. That stat was from Robbie Hummel last night on the call. Okay, I mean, just incredible. And then, like, Michigan, they took 18 more free throws than Purdue did. Outscored them by 12 at the free throw line. Like, Purdue's just small. And when you have size and you play against Purdue, you have a great chance to win. It's part of why, like, Indiana had a great chance to win that game in West Lafayette. It's why they're going to have a great chance to win it in Bloomington on Sunday. Because if you have size against Purdue, like, you have a chance to beat them because they're just a small basketball team. Like, they had to play Will Berg last night in legitimate minutes against Michigan State. Like, they are desperate for any kind of size on the inside. Okay, like they are desperate for any form of rim protection. Like, they don't have any. They average 1.8 blocks per game. That is last in the Big Ten. Okay, like they don't have size. They can't really protect the rim. Like they just have a lot of issues. Like, it's hard to win games when you can't protect the rim and you only have 2 offensive options that can, like, legitimately score, and you only have 1 guard who can actually handle the basketball consistently. And that guy has to play the entire game because of that. Like, so many things have to go right for Purdue to even have a chance to win these games. Like they have to win the turnover battle. Like that's another reason why they've lost 3 in a row. Like, they turned it over 12 times last night against Michigan State. Michigan State only turned it over 8. Against Wisconsin, Purdue did a great job. Only turned the basketball over 4 times. The issue is Wisconsin only turned it over 3 times. Against Michigan, both teams turned it over 11 times. And if you can't defend the rim, then you better force turnovers. Okay, like when things were going really well for Purdue and they were ranked 7th in the country, that's what they were doing. It was a heavy dose of Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn being great, and they were forcing a ton of turnovers. And in these last 3 games that they've lost, they've stopped forcing turnovers. They have to get back to that if they want to continue to win some games. And honestly, the fact that Purdue even has an opportunity to beat some of these better teams, it's a testament to Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn and how good those guys are. Like, they're both having to do so much offensively just to keep Purdue in games. Okay, like, betting on Purdue now feels like you're just putting together a crazy parlay. Like, in order for them to win, like, Braden Smith has to score 20-plus points. He has to get 6-plus assists. He has to have under 3.5 turnovers. Trey Kaufman-Renn has to have 20-plus points. He also has to have 8-plus rebounds. And they have to force their opponent into 13 turnovers or more. And they have to make over 9.5 threes to win. If I, like, gave you that parlay and was like, hey, put $100 on this, you'd be like, nah, I'm good. Because, like that's just a lot of things that have to go right. And when I watch Purdue, that is my takeaway. Like, so many things have to go correctly in order for them to win. And as good as they are, as much as I like watching them play, and as much as I like watching Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn figure out kind of how to score, and as great of a coach as Matt Painter is, like they just don't have enough outside of those two guys to beat the better teams. Like this Daniel Jacobson injury, like it's a sliding doors moment. Because if he doesn't get hurt, he gives them a third guy who can really score the basketball. And he gives them a guy who can really protect the rim because he's 7'2" and he's, and he can move. I don't know if he moves great, but he moves pretty well. So like that injury is just kind of going to sit over their heads for the rest of the season. Because if that never happens, then this team's a lot better. And maybe we're mentioning them amongst, one of the 10 teams in the country that's good enough to win the whole thing. Maybe. I don't know. We didn't see Daniel Jacobson play against any great opponents, but in the clips that we saw of him, he looked pretty good. Speaking of pretty good, Indiana is that sometimes, but not always. Today is Wednesday, therefore it's, not quite a holiday, but it is Get Over the Hump Day here on Indy's Sports Ticket here on the Real Jonathan Smith Show. And can Mike Woodson get this team to the NCAA tournament? Can he get them over that hump? There is a way. And I actually think that it's a real possibility. I'll tell you what Indiana has to do to make the tournament when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Sometimes I struggle to get to sleep. My body stopped for the day, but my mind is still running. So I take ZzzQuil.
ZzzQuil, the world's #1 sleep aid brand, has a range of non-habit-forming products to fit you and your family's needs. Invest in a great night's sleep for the best you tomorrow.
I'm awake and ready to take on anything.
Better days start with ZzzQuil nights. Explore our products at ZzzQuil.com. Use as directed. Keep out of reach of children.
This is a story of the one. As a maintenance specialist for university housing, he knows college students can major in wear and tear. Plus, housing so many students doesn't leave a lot of room to house all the supplies he needs. That's where Grainger comes in.
The best takes. The real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice day. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy's Sports Ticket. If you want to head over there and subscribe. You can also watch on Twitter, __ Jonathan Smith, if you want to follow me there. You can also listen via that Indy's Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you get your apps, or you can just listen on good old 1430 AM. It is Wednesday. It's Get Over the Hump Day in honor of Mike Woodson and his just never-ending pursuit of getting the Indiana Hoosiers over the hump.
Uh-oh, guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Huh? Anybody? Julie, hey, guess what day it is? Oh, come on, I know you can hear me. Mike. What day is it, Mike? Leslie, guess what today is?
It's hump day.
Woo-hoo! Hump day!
No, as a coach, I gotta get us over that hump. I gotta get them comfortable, knowing that you're gonna be in close games and you gotta make plays coming down the home stretch. I mean, in the tournament, we were right there. I just didn't get them over the hump, man. And that's something that I live with every day of my life. Because I truly believe that was the team to really make some noise and get to the finals, and I just couldn't get them over the hump.
Mike Woodson just can't seem to get any of his teams over the hump, whether it's the NBA, college basketball, whatever it is. He just struggles to get over that hump for some reason. And Indiana has gotten over it once this year. That was against Michigan State. Indiana's 15-11. That they could very easily be 17-9. If they beat Michigan, if they beat Maryland, if they beat Purdue, if they beat UCLA, we can just kind of keep going. Okay. They lose a lot of close games, and it's frustrating. With that being said, they can still make the NCAA tournament. There's a lot of discussion, or there's a push for people to expand the NCAA tournament. I think it's a terrible idea. Okay, please do not expand the NCAA tournament. It does not need to happen. I'm sure coaches are going to push for it, because then they can be like, oh, look at that. I made the NCAA tournament 3 years in a row. Can you really fire me? It's I don't know. You were a 14 seed all 3 years. I think we can. But please don't, because honestly, the fact that Indiana can make the tournament kind of feels wrong. It kind of does. But in their defense, and the case for them as to why they can still make the tournament, is because they don't have any bad losses. They have a signature win over Michigan State on the road. Of all of their losses, only 2 of them have come to teams that are currently not projected to be in the tournament. That's Northwestern and Iowa. And I don't think those are terrible losses. It's not like they lost to Winthrop or anybody like that. Okay? The Hoosiers have a great win over Michigan State. They need one more, though. They need to win out to make the tournament, which is very possible. But they'd have to beat Purdue in order to be able to make that happen. Okay? They are a good basketball team that is very capable of winning games. They are, but for some reason, they just can't seem to get over that hump, and they're going to have to on Sunday when they host Purdue if they want to make the NCAA tournament. And one could argue that right now is the best time to play against Purdue. Okay, they're struggling. They've lost 3 games in a row, all that kind of stuff. But for me, I wouldn't want to play Purdue right now just because they've lost 3 in a row. And Matt Painter and Braden Smith and Trey Coffin-Wren, they're going to figure it out at some point, and that they would love to figure it out on the road at Assembly Hall, and that they'd love to sweep IU this year. Seriously, that's a thing. But in Indiana's defense, we've seen the blueprint to beat Purdue, and it is just be large. If you're large, you're going to have a chance, and Indiana is most definitely that. Okay, they're big in the front court, they're big in their back courts. And because of that, they could have beaten Purdue on the road in West Lafayette earlier this season. Like they are just a tough matchup for Purdue with the amount of size that they have. Okay, if they can win that game, then they'll have a good chance to win out and make the NCAA tournament. Okay, because they're scheduled the rest of the way after Purdue especially. It's nothing but winnable games. So obviously they have Purdue at home on Sunday. Then they have Penn State at home. They go to Washington and then to Oregon, which those games will be tough because anytime you're traveling out west, like those games are just a little bit tougher. Okay. Then they close the season with Ohio State at home. Okay. They could win out. Like that is definitely in the cards for them. That's what, 5 games? Purdue, Penn State, Washington, Oregon, Ohio State. Yeah. 5 games. If they do that, they're sitting at 20-11. Go into, the Big Ten tournament, win a game or two. That's 22 wins, and you're probably going to make the NCAA tournament. Right? That is in the cards for them. That being said, I would be absolutely shocked if Indiana found a way to win out. Because they are the definition of inconsistent this year. If they beat Purdue, though, they give themselves a little bit of breathing room. I think that even if they lose to Purdue and they win their other games, they'll have a chance. If they beat Purdue and they lose one of those other games, like they'll still have a pretty decent shot at getting in. But if they win out, I do think that they would be a lock to get in because they don't have any bad losses. They'll have 2 great wins over Purdue and Michigan State. And Mike Woodson, despite all the crap that's happened this year, would have found a way to get his team over the hump and into the NCAA tournament, which would mean that he made the NCAA tournament in 3 out of his 4 years as the head coach of Indiana. Which, they've definitely had worse head coaches like Tom Crean, who made the NCAA tournament 4 times in 9 years. But once again, I wouldn't bet on this Indiana team to make the NCAA tournament because they're just, like I said, they are the definition of inconsistent. Okay, they're up and down, and not even in terms of results, right? Like, because when you look at the Indiana schedule and you look at the games that they've won, like they've won almost every game that they were supposed to win, with the exception of the Iowa game and the Northwestern game. Okay, and they've lost every game that they were supposed to lose, with the exception of beating Michigan State on the road. But for the most part, the teams that you expect for Indiana to beat, they do, and the teams that you expect for them to lose to, they do. And so when I say that they're inconsistent, I just mean like within the flow of the game. It seems like every game that Indiana plays, someone's up by 10 at some point. Sometimes Indiana pushes it up to 10. Other times the opposition pushes it up to 10. And you just kind of, and then, the other team finds a way to kind of come back. Indiana either gets hot and they figure out how to score for a little bit, or they just kind of go cold. And then they wind up losing in embarrassing fashion. Like that's just who they are this year. Like they haven't been able to put together a consistent 40 minutes at all this season. And I just find it really hard to believe that they're all of a sudden going to do that in their final 5 games of the year. So once again, I would not bet on this Indiana team to make the NCAA tournament, even though it's a very possible thing. Now, I would be more likely, I don't think I would, but I would be more likely to bet for the Pacers to return to the Eastern Conference Finals. I don't think it's that far-fetched of a thing because of that stretch that we saw them play before they went to Paris, where they won a bunch of games, got back over 500, played some of the best defense in the NBA in that stretch. They were a top 5 defense. They were a top 10 offense. And if they can return to that after the All-Star break, then this is undoubtedly a team that can make a run. Undoubtedly. Okay, if you play top 5 defense and top 10 offense, you're probably one of the 4 or 5 best teams in the NBA. Right. And then you get into matchups. Like, I don't think that they match up with Boston very well, which then again, no one does. So we'll kind of have to wait and see how all that goes. But in order for that to happen, in order for the Pacers to be able to return to that level of basketball and honestly be even better, one, they obviously have to stay healthy. Miles Turner returning tomorrow night when the Pacers start playing again is huge, right? Because he anchors that defense. But Tyrese Halliburton has to be better. Like, the best version of Tyrese Halliburton can win you a lot of games. And I don't think that we've gotten that from him this year. The scoring is down. He's not taking as many shots, which is frustrating because he's a good scorer. I think he should take 18 shots a game because he's good enough to take that many shots. And when he's scoring, much like Purdue when Braden Smith is scoring, the Pacers are just better. They're much tougher to defend. Okay, the other thing that I really want to see him do, because the Pacers are at their best when he does this, is get into the paint. He's shooting 72% at the rim this year. That's the second highest mark of his career. And that's also a pretty elite number for a guard. For reference, Miles Turner, a center, is at 73% in terms of converting field goals at the rim this season. From 3 to 10 feet away from the basket, Halliburton's making 56% of those shots. For comparison, Miles Turner, once again a center, who should be pretty good 10 feet and in, is only making 41% of his shots. Okay, Tyrese Halliburton in the lane is the best version of Tyrese Halliburton. He's an absolute weapon in that spot for this Pacers team. He's efficient on his shots when he's in the paint, and he's a great passer. So he's able to kick out to shooters and do all the things that he likes to do, which is pass the basketball and get his teammates involved. The issue is he doesn't touch the paint enough. And when he does, he's not looking to score. Only 12% of Tyrese Halliburton's shots this year have come at the rim. That's the lowest mark of his career. And it's one of the weakest marks of any high-volume scorer, guys that take 15 shots per game or more, which is about where Tyrese Halliburton's at. He is too good in the lane and at the rim to only take 12% of his shots there. Okay, he settles for too many threes. He needs to get the ball to the rim. He's a great passer, so if he can get there, he can kick out the shooters and do those things, but you still have to be a threat to score, and only shooting 12% of your shots at the rim is just not enough for teams to really respect you to do that. And look, he's a great shooter, so he should still take 7 or 8 threes a game, which is where he's at right now in terms of his average three-pointers taken per game on the season. He should just also take more shots at the rim. Like, instead of taking 14 shots a game, take 18 with those extra 4 shots coming at the rim. If he does that, then the Pacers will be a better basketball team. The offense will be better. And if they can continue to be a top 5 defense, then they become a real force. They become a real team that has a real chance to make a run to the Eastern Conference Finals. They're deep. Okay, like they can play small, they can go big. They've got, go-to guys who can go and get you a bucket, and Pascal Siakam and Tyrese Halliburton. Okay, like I said, they're deep. Like they've got guys who are going to come in off the bench and score a bunch of points, which is a huge advantage. So this team's really good. They can make a run to the Eastern Conference Finals. Tyrese Halliburton just has to be a little bit more aggressive with the ball. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to tune into The Real Jonathan Smith Show. Head over to YouTube, subscribe to the Indies Sports Ticket YouTube channel. That way you can watch the show there, and you can hop in the chat and be part of the conversation. You can follow me on Twitter at __ Jonathan Smith. You can follow the station at Ticket 1430. And yeah, make sure you also download that Indy Sports Ticket app. The Dan Dockett Show comes your way next. He's on from noon to 3. Kent Sterling joining at 2 o'clock for the Power Hour. Eddie White at 1 o'clock. It's going to be a fantastic show. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to tune in. I'll talk to you tomorrow starting at 10 a.m.